Hey everybody, welcome back to Young Bucks. Today we're going to be talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about tobacco through a delivery device called the JUUL. I'm Andrew Hall. Joining me is Ben Nye. Eventually we're going to get to the valuation on this company, JUUL, and see if it makes any kind of sense as an investment, at least for those who've gotten in already. It's not publicly traded, so it's a little bit difficult. But starting off, Ben, are you a JUUL guy?
I have not used the JUUL. I don't own a JUUL. I was just informed about the price of the JUUL, so I probably will not buy a JUUL. But I'm interested in the JUUL.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I actually own two. I owned one that I kept at my house so that I wouldn't lose it at work, and then I brought one to work that I kept here, and then I went on the road, traveled a little bit, lost the work JUUL on the road, and then brought the home one in, and then lost it at work. I think Sam or somebody in the office may have stolen it, and who knows what happened to it. But JUUL's done a couple things really well, in my opinion, from a design standpoint. Number one, it looks like a USB drive, so super convenient, way easier, less clunky, less maintenance than a big vaporizer would be in one of those big things. You don't get those huge, robust clouds that you would get from like the hardcore vape shops, but you don't get that. But they've also made really good flavors and enough variety in the flavors to where you can kind of get a little bit of everything. And they've really pushed it through as this e-cig type product that's low maintenance. You can get on a subscription plan, things like that, and get the JUUL pod sent to you and save 10 or 15% or whatever it may be. So it's an interesting product. And I think that's kind of where we're at this cross section as we start to think about tobacco and how people are taking it in. They've really made it pretty addictive, which is not new for tobacco.
Well, the business proposition, I think, for JUUL is actually quite interesting vis-a-vis other e-cigs in that they are making it very addictive, probably more addictive even than cigarettes in some cases. And they have made it appeal to really young people, have this healthier kind of mentality, but still make it incredibly addictive. And I think it's also notable that it's not coming from a traditional tobacco company.
Yep. Yeah. It's really kind of a tech company in a way that distributes that nicotine, gives you that hit, doesn't give you all the tar that you would get from traditional smoking. It gives you a little bit more nicotine than like a blue e-cig would, so it gets you a little bit more there. And then the flavors, I think, are a little bit more subtle than you would get from a vaporizer. I vaped for a while, shout out to Vape Nation, vaped for a little while, and the thing that would be frustrating is you'd fill up this tank with this liquid, and you'd love that liquid, you'd love drawing on it for the first couple of draws, and then it's like, all right, I'm really sick of this honeysuckle flavor or this blackberry pie flavor or whatever it may be. It really would get kind of exhausting. With JUUL, you can kind of change the pods in and out. You can go from the mint chocolate chip ice cream or whatever they call it to creme brulee really easily, fruit punch, what have you. It allows you to do that, and I think it's perfect for a low maintenance non-traditional smoker. And by non-traditional smoker, I mean, frankly, more young people are jumping in on JUUL maybe than people would have expected with cigarettes. And also myself, I've never actually been a huge cigarette guy, but I'm all about the JUUL. So very into that. And then the subscription model, again, as easy as it can be. They verify your ID through government agencies and all that kind of stuff, but they'll ship it to you, which I think is a model that everybody sees the economic value to, in terms of if you can get people on there, they're going to continue to pay for a subscription as long as you continue to give them a good product.
And here's the thing about the JUUL is that they're not having to worry about the lines around the states like other cigarette companies would in terms of taxes, et cetera. So from that, they're also competing at a little bit of an advantage. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. If we look at the business proposition and the moat and the valuation, I guess just from a pure business perspective, and then we'll get to valuation, what are your thoughts on the sustainability long-term of this company?
I think it's sustainable, but unfortunately it's a very superficial product. And as we were preparing in our pre-production meeting here just a second ago, one of our interns came in and was like, hey, we don't even JUUL anymore. And this is coming from an 18 or 19-year-old kid. Not that he would ever JUUL anyway, but he came in and was basically like, there's this other product, it's a little bit cheaper, it's just as easy, it lasts almost as long, it's almost as good. So there's already competition in the market. You knew that was going to come. You knew that was going to be there, because although there are certainly some technologies that are somewhat proprietary in terms of what they're doing and how it looks specifically and things like that, at the end of the day, the JUUL is not all that different than a very condensed vaporizer or a slightly more technical e-cig. There's not a whole lot of moat in terms of who could replicate this. The reality is at any given time, people could say, hey, let's make this smaller, let's make the flavors better, let's make this hold more juice, let's make it last longer, it charges on a USB, let's make it to where Apple's coming out with all these wireless charging devices and things like that. I mean, you could have one that's charging wirelessly. There's infinite innovation that could happen by JUUL, but could happen by somebody else.
Yeah. Interesting. And now the big story, and this is why we're talking about it, is that earlier in the week, there was an announced valuation on JUUL at about $15 billion. They raised approximately $650 million or thereabouts to continue to fund their growth. And big hedge fund, Tiger Global, jumped in. What are your thoughts on just a $15 billion valuation on a company that makes a product that strength is really the brand, but it's such a new product? Is the brand really a strength at this point?
It's staggering to me because it seems, kind of, you think back to like the Shark Tank type pitches and things like that. The edge they have right now is that they're a first mover specifically in targeting younger people, and understand they've disrupted an industry that's always targeted young people. Tobacco has always been in need of young smokers and lifelong smokers especially. So they've disrupted that. I think they went a different direction than some of the more traditional vape companies. I think vapes really came out as a way to stop smoking, so to speak, and that was really their marketing. This was almost a way to start smoking, to start smoking in a lighter, more socially acceptable way if you're 18 years old. So obviously don't smoke until you're 18. Don't smoke, period. Don't vape. Don't do any of it. But that's the disclosure there. But I think they have disrupted. I don't know that they're much more. I'd have a hard time valuing them as anything more than a current market leader and a disruptor at this point. And I don't know that that disruption is sustainable over the long term because of that competition. So a $15 billion valuation seems rich. We've mentioned these pods and these little 4-packs that they come in. I think those run about $15 per pack. And so if you think of that, they're getting valued at 1 billion packs of these. And so it's one of those things. I think it's certainly kind of a trope or almost its own meme where you think every teenager is out there juuling. The reality is when I actually think about it and I think of people around that age that I interact with, I don't really see that many of them actually juuling. So I think it's a little bit overplayed, and the assumption that this is going to be the new normal, that everyone's going to do this, that's a tough call.
So when you think about the risks, and I would kind of bucket them into 3 buckets. I think about the competition. I think about perhaps regulators coming for them.
That's the big one.
And I think about just overall market size in general. What are you most, if you were part of this fundraising round, what would you be most concerned with?
I think I'd, number one, be most concerned with regulations. That's a huge thing. We obviously know the impacts of tobacco in traditional forms. I don't think we know all that much about what's long-term nicotine consumption without traditional burning of tar and leaf tobacco. What's that actually look like? I mean, we know people that use nicotine patches to quit smoking. We know people that continue to use them for a long time. But with the JUUL, I mean, I know people that work in this office that go through more than 1 pod a day. What's that look like in 10 years? I don't know that we really know that. So that's going to be a huge issue. And I think especially in the climate that we're in now in terms of healthcare costs and over-regulation in a lot of industries, not just tobacco, that might be an area where it's good to have over-regulation. But given the environment and the climate that we're in right now, I don't think regulators are going to sit around and wait and see what happens. I think they're going to be a little bit more proactive in making sure 10 years from now we're not looking at a room full of 28-year-olds that, just have crushed their souls with nicotine for so long that their body's crumbling with it. So that concerns me the most. The second most concerning thing is I think just the volume and the actual size of the market. I think there's a good chance that in time we look back and we say, well, there was that little blip. We had this little blip where a bunch of people started juuling or using vape pens or whatever the equivalent was. I don't know that we're going to necessarily say this grew the market of tobacco users.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Obviously, I'm not speaking from a position of experience with the product, so it's difficult for me. But I think just paying $15 billion, if I were to buy the business for $15 billion with just the cash sitting in my bank account, joking.
Just a small amount of it.
I would be very concerned about the ultimate risk. To me, it's a bit of a lottery ticket. If you want to participate in the fundraising, you want to use a very, very small portion of portion of your money.
Here is an underrated upside to it, and I don't think we know how to calculate this. And similarly, would I pay $15 billion for this? Probably not, but it's interesting to think about. Cannabis legalized in a lot of states. They're having really hard times, these kind of cannabis-based tech companies, patenting anything because you can't get federal patent protection on a delivery device that's delivering something that is illegal at a federal level. So a lot of my belief in JUUL is that they're continuing to try to develop and to market a device that at some point could be replaced with a cannabis-based oil as opposed to a nicotine-based product. And from that perspective, if you build that brand awareness and you can maintain it for however long that takes for cannabis to be legal on a federal level, my guess is 5 to 10 years. If you could maintain that and continue to develop products where all of a sudden you've got something that is either interchangeable or is at least interrecognizable to where all of a sudden you can order a weed pod instead of a JUUL pod, but shove it into the same device, or a device that's, if nothing else, very similar and something you're very comfortable with, JUUL could have a huge lead in that if they can continue to kind of just stay half of a step in front of competition is all. If they can do that and get things in a row to where all of a sudden they can get some patent protection once things are legalized, that's a really compelling upside story. That's a lot of ifs because, as we've already said, the 5 to 10 year period, they've got to basically keep running downfield, picture the running back, and he's got a guy just as big, just as strong, just as fast, and his only tool really is a stiff arm, and he's got to just keep stiff arming down the field, and they've got another 60 yards to go, in my opinion.
That would be the home run, obviously, if that happens. But I guess on that note, we'll leave it there and just continue to follow the story.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Tusk Media is a subsidiary of Narwhal Capital Management. Ratings and reviews of Tusk Media content are not to be construed as endorsements of opinions, analysis, or services offered by Tusk or its parent company. The opinions and predictions shared here are professional beliefs at the time of publication. We are not under duress from any of the corporate entities mentioned. This is not a solicitation to take any particular action. Although we are investment advisors, this information should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. We strive to be as impartial, insightful, and accurate as possible. We base our opinions, analysis, and calculations on information we believe to be reliable, but we cannot guarantee its accuracy. We can, however, guarantee that our opinions will sometimes be flat out wrong due to a variety of factors. Employees and clients of Narwhal Capital Management may or may not hold positions in the securities detailed and may or may not hold these positions in the future. A full list of all securities purchased, sold, or held during the 12 months preceding the date of this publication can be provided upon request. Unless otherwise noted, all data accessed via MarketWatch or the Bloomberg terminal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. A copy of Narwhal's Form ADV is available at the SEC's website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov, or from Narwhal upon written request.